Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. So, for those of you who do not know, a figurehead is an ornate, usually carved from wood, though sometimes cast in metal, figure, usually of a person, but not always, that's mounted on the extreme bow of the ship. The tradition goes all the way back to ancient navies. The Greeks would typically paint eyes on the front of their ships. By the time the Roman Navy comes along, they're starting to put like actual cast metal figures on there. Egypt and Phoenicia, their ships tend to have similar things as well. You're assembly lining these trireme type warships out, and to give each one a different personality, they would give them a different figurehead. And largely, that tradition continues into the modern day with some clear breaks. Or maybe it's just one of those things that's so intrinsic to human nature. We try to personify these machines to the point that we get rid of them every now and again, and then we come back to them later. So obviously Roman civilization dies out, those ancient Mediterranean civilizations die out, but then the Vikings introduce figureheads again, and they are something to introduce fear into their opponents and to try and bring luck and personality to their ships. And they tended to do more animals, dragons, snakes, dolphins, things like that. And then again, after the Vikings, the practice sort of dies out as ships go from being these long pointy things to much rounder things. By the Elizabethan era, modern state-run navies are a thing again. And those sorts of ships are huge national investments, and so they start to get a lot of decorative work. They have a lot of scroll work around the sterns that are very highly decorated. They get even decorated carvings around the gun ports, and so the figurehead starts to make a reappearance, and it remains in that form largely through the 16, 17, and 1800s. During this time, we get the modern concept of the figurehead, which again, it's often a person. Folks often think that ships always personified as a she. That's not true, but in Western navies usually, then the figureheads are always female. Sometimes the figurehead is an animal. Sometimes the figurehead is related to the ship's name. For example, an HMS Unicorn would likely have a unicorn figurehead. Sometimes it is supposed to be a female character that more represents the ship. Sometimes it represents a person. For the American ship of the line Delaware, a chief of the Delaware Indian tribe was chosen as the figurehead. Sometimes the figurehead doesn't really seem to have a use, and figureheads aren't necessarily tied to the ship. Remember, we're talking about wooden ships. Some of these ships have significantly long careers where they're replacing rotted wood, and sometimes this includes the figureheads. So I'll use the example of USS Constitution, which over her illustrious career, most of the time has not had a figurehead at all. And I'll talk about what the alternatives are to figureheads later. But during the parts of her career when she had figureheads, had something like 5 different ones. So originally, she's built with a figurehead representing the Grecian demigod Hercules, just a symbol of strength for the new nation. That gets broken off in a collision with USS President, which I believe had a figurehead of the president at that time, John Adams. Probably not the most attractive figurehead, but you know, at the end of the collision, President still had hers, Constitution did not. So Constitutions get replaced with something else. Again, talk about that in a second. Later on, that less decorative feature gets replaced again. At various points in her career, she had 2 separate Andrew Jackson figureheads. Initially, it sort of made sense. Andrew Jackson was the hero of the War of 1812, and Constitution very much is the hero ship of the War of 1812. So that original mating made sense. However, the former general turned president had some interesting political ideas that earned him some enemies that led to another local Boston ship captain climbing on board the ship in Boston Harbor while she was still a commissioned U.S. Navy warship and cutting the head off of that particular figurehead. Figureheads mean a lot. They say a lot about the ship and the nation that is making this investment. They're not cheap. Your typical figurehead is often about 1.5 to 2 times the size of a regular person. And they're these really ornately carved things, and it's really interesting. In the old blueprints and drawings of these ships, it just shows an empty space at the bow, and often the designer will come up with, hey, I want this to represent Hercules, and he'll be carrying a fasces of things representing the new American government, and a scroll that represents unity, and he'll be wearing a laurel representing victory, and those sorts of things. So they're expensive, but what is a warship besides a massively expensive state-sponsored piece of propaganda? So it made sense at that time. As the designs of ships starts to change and navies start to grow in size, and the materials used on ships start to change, you see the figureheads go out of style. They're very easily damaged in combat and expensive to replace. So even during the age of sail, you start to see large numbers of what are called billet heads or fiddle heads. I prefer the term billet head, but they tend to be more of a like rounded piece of scroll work. And ships like Constitution or Constellation on display here in the United States now have billet heads instead of the more ornate figureheads that their earlier iterations might have contained. So that was the cheaper alternative, and it still brings your bow to a nice rounded point to cut through the waves like it's supposed to. The real end of the figurehead, billet head sort of thing comes when the complete design of ships changes and you go to iron and steel vessels like early pre-dreadnoughts that now no longer have the top of the bow of the ship coming to a point like on an Iowa-class battleship or on an older sailing ship. They have more of a ram bow, so that leaves much less room for a figurehead. However, ornate metal scroll work was still very common, and ships like the cruiser Olympia across the river from us were built with that sort of thing. But again, in wartime, this gets removed so it doesn't get damaged. And so eventually, I think it was around 1909 in the American Navy, they get rid of all that decorative scroll work, and they usually replace it with just a really comparatively small shield with red, white, and blue, not like an ornate golden scroll work. That very much is a descendant of the figurehead. And by World War I, this stuff is basically completely out of style everywhere. There is one commissioned U.S. vessel that still has a figurehead. Pause the video now and leave a comment down below if you can think of what that is. Another alternative to figureheads that you see on American Navy ships around Olympia's time period is often there will be ornate scroll work and sometimes even personages representing the ship in between the gun barrels mounted on the forward turret. Thankfully, nobody asked me what New Jersey's version of that would be, because with 3 turrets, it wouldn't quite work as well on us, so we're not going to go into that. So, finally, the point of the video. What do I think New Jersey's figurehead would look like? So we have a lot of different examples of types of things from other U.S. Navy ships. Obviously nothing contemporary, but other ships. You've got presidents or other political figures. You've got Grecian god type figures. You've even got ideas. Things like winged victory or concepts like that are sometimes chosen. Sometimes they're representative people, sometimes they are specific people. Again, remember John Adams. And even animals. I can't think of any famous animals specifically attributed with the state of New Jersey. Maybe it would be something like the state bird. Really funny idea would be the Jersey Devil. For New Jersey, since she earned the nickname later on in her career, perhaps a dragon painted black would be a good idea. What I think her initial figurehead would have been was a figure of liberty. And I think it would be a figure of liberty because that is one of the personifications that's on the ship's silver set. So again, the concept of having a decorative figure like this is completely out of style by the time New Jersey comes around, but the ship's silver donated by the state is one place that still has these, and New Jersey's has two figureheads on it. One is a female representing liberty, and one is a female representing plenty. So New Jersey is the garden state. Plenty has a plow for planting gardens of food and things like that. So those are interesting ideas. I think liberty, especially given the context when this ship was being built during World War II. Notice we talked about Constitution, and over her career needing several, she gets into collisions. Well, New Jersey gets into 2 collisions. Maybe we have to replace ours at various times. So I think it would make sense that during the Korean War, since during World War II she had earned the name of the Black Dragon, they would probably, assuming that Liberty gets damaged, or maybe it's removed and put on display at the Naval Academy like often happens, or in the Governor's Mansion like where our silver is with the bust of Liberty and Plenty. Maybe it gets replaced with that Black Dragon we talked about earlier. During the Vietnam commissioning, if they needed to replace it, it was a very austere reactivation. I bet they would have saved money and replaced it with just whatever the steel ship version of a billet head would be, some slight decorative scroll work, but not like a really ornate casting. Besides, the state of New Jersey at that time paid for a closed-circuit television system for the ship's crew, so they didn't have the money to put into a figurehead. And during the 80s, I think it would be a big giant bust of the Gipper himself, Ronald Reagan on the bow. So those are just my thoughts of what the battleship's figurehead would be. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think some of the figureheads that could go on a contemporary battleship like New Jersey might be, or maybe some of her sister ships. I'd love to hear your ideas. For those of you who were wondering what commissioned vessel in the US still has a figurehead, it is not Constitution. She has a billet head. It is the Coast Guard cutter Eagle, which has an eagle figurehead on the bow. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.